Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tales Off the Holotables, the only Galaxy of Heroes show where you'll rarely learn anything worth a damn about the game itself, but everything about the players that enjoy it and the creators that support it. Today I'm joined by Belloq, or Belloq56 is really your handle on everything. And you've got your hands in a little bit of everything. We first met on Reddit. We're on Discord now. I didn't realize until recently you're a big part of the raid server. We have collaborated, not necessarily on camera. You're helping me out with sponsored stuff right now that we don't need to get into because that's irrelevant for what we're talking about. But you do a lot for the game without necessarily being a name that maybe everybody associates with it. So first off, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm having a good time. I'm excited to be here, honestly. I was kind of looking forward to this.
I was talking to a few people before doing this, and I've kind of decided since starting this project in, I think January, and we're in July now. For years and years and years, I was like, man, I'm like an introvert that can pretend to be extroverted. And now doing this, I'm like, no, actually, I think it's the opposite because like it's the same. Anytime I come on to talk to someone, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a great night, right? I get to like have a drink, find out what's going on in their lives, and like meet the people that I've been playing this game with for a really long time. And that's just the whole vibe here. I hate saying this. I'm 37. I'm getting older. I know I look very young. You are much younger. You're a college student. Which means you've been playing this game literally since you were a kid, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, how
More or less.
since release?
Oh, I was 12. So I started in May of 2016.
Okay.
Played for a little bit. I dropped it. I think I probably played somewhere into early 2017 at the most. I think I was like 700,000 GP, something around there. I know I was at least level 85. But then I came back to the game. I just opened it up one day randomly in like 2019, February specifically. And there was like a little pop-up thing about like Darth Revan is here. And I was like, oh, fuck. Okay. And I played the game every single day since then.
That's what it always is, like that favorite character that pulls people. For me, I was just like, I'm bored, I'm playing this game, and I'm going to play it till the heat death of the universe. But that seems to be for everyone. It's like, oh, this is a character that I love, and like I have to get this character. And then somehow I've been playing, you said 2019, February 2019, somehow I've been playing 5 years since then, and
Yeah.
it just evolves. So what's your GP? I don't think I've ever looked at your account, actually. Maybe once.
You did once. Yeah, you did a roster review for me.
Was
at
that
one point.
on camera, or was this pre-camera?
It was on camera.
It was on camera. See,
Yeah. There's a live stream somewhere out there.
what happens is I'll do a roster review, and then 3 weeks later, someone will be like, hey, do you remember my roster review? How do you feel about this? And I'll be like, I've done 30 since then. Yeah. I literally do not know what your roster looks like. Like, I have no idea. So you're towards the end of the game. What's your GP?
I'm sitting, I think, somewhere between 10.5 and 10.6. I think it's like 10.53, somewhere like that.
That's not bad for 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, because of course, Lightspeed Bundles did help out a lot. So I did completely ignore Kylo and Rey just because of the way stuff went around. So that was just two big boosts right there, kind of towards the end of last year. And I've been kind of more or less picking up most of them as they went along. I skipped the Geonosian one. I already had gas and all of that stuff, so I didn't get the C-3PO, Padme, gas, any of that stuff. But pretty much I've gotten all the rest of them. But yeah, I mean, it's just been a lot of very focused playing the game because I was like, I want this thing, and I would just play it until I got it, and there was no yeah.
So, I mean, you're involved with the raid server. I didn't realize until recently, like, you're an admin there, and you're like big there. How did that get started?
I mean, it was honestly just kind of a very random thing because Pariah, the guy who made the server, he was like, oh, we're looking to expand once Naboo raid kind of comes around.
Okay.
And so anybody who wants to join, and so me and one other person were like, hey, I'd be willing to help out.
So it's pretty recent then.
It was pretty recent. I want to say it was like April, May, somewhere around there. Because it was like right as it was kind of getting announced. Yeah. And as we were trying to be like, setting up all the back end stuff for it.
And now, I know that like when we talk on my Discord and you nerd out on this Naboo raid, you've helped me out on my streams and given me tips. We collaborated on a big spreadsheet to kind of get people more involved with it. Not necessarily the best teams, but like the best teams to quickly be able to increase your scores. What was your involvement like with not Naboo with like Endor and Crate? Do you feel like you were not necessarily like on an admin side, but like you were as excited, you were as involved, you were pushing as much as you are because you are on top of your shit when it comes to Naboo.
I love Naboo raid. Yeah. Crate was an interesting one. I had just kind of been in the perfect position to get Jabba right as he was getting announced and released and everything. So I had him, I think, I want to say, because I took all the screenshots, I have all the days. It was, I think, January 25th was the day I unlocked Jabba. And then, of course, it came out, I think, May 4th was when they actually released the raid. So I was there ready with the team well in advance. I know I had them all Relic 7 day one, and I bumped them all to Relic 8 within the first like week of the raid. But other than that, I didn't really invest too much because I had the other stuff. I mean, I was missing Inquisitors. I was doing Afra because Rise of the Empire had just come out, and so I was one of the only people who was kind of on top of that because I had done like one of those 5,000 crystal pack things, and they gave me Sana Staros, and she was unfarmable at the time, and so I was like, okay, well, I really want to get her. This is a character that's kind of cool. I think it would be fun. So I was doing Afra and then Inquisitors, and so like I kind of just fell off there. I pretty much started and ended at like 5 million points, and it was kind of just something I lost a lot of interest in. Endor was kind of a similar thing. I was getting Leia because that was kind of where I was hitting my stride with like kind of being an end game player, and I was like super excited for it. Played it a few times, kind of went meh. You know, I think I was getting like 12.2, 12.3 every single time.
Well, you're doing better than I was, so.
Yeah, I was remodding. I was still like playing actively because I was like the raid officer for my guild, so I was having to sort of lead by example and be like, hey guys, you should do this. But I was losing interest in it really fast, and it was a lot because it was so different from all the rest of the game. It kind of just felt like a mini game thing that it was just like play it a little bit. It's not the end of the world to do. It wasn't super difficult, but just get in, get out, be done. Not really care about, I maxed Han Piet Drogon a couple times, but like I wasn't sitting there being like, I have to get my 2.7 every single week or I'm gonna explode.
Yeah,
it was just like 2.3, 2.5, whatever.
That raid was, I mean, going back to Crate, because we have like this pattern. You said you unlocked Jabba January 25th, somewhere around there. And that was like a weird zone just because we didn't have the new raid structure yet. So there was a bigger lag between Jabba and the raid than like Leia or with Jar Jar and Padme Quadme. There was a bigger time jump. I think you were kind of in the same position a lot of people were in where... And I've noticed on Reddit and Discord, people kind of forget this about Crate Raid. The teams weren't great, and largely
they were not.
A lot of people were just doing, okay, do my Jabba, call it a day, right? And with their raid boxes, that's what my guild did. We didn't care.
Yeah, and I think also another thing that a lot of people forget is like you probably had like a Gear 12 Old Republic team.
Yeah.
Especially for the lower end as well, you had a Relic 8 Boba Fett, and that was it. You did your Relic 8 Boba, you did your Gear 12 Old Republic. Maybe toss some stuff for like 150,000 points and call it a day.
Yes,
and then because that was what a lot of people in my guild did.
That's everybody that I mean, yes, there obviously you have your gauntlet guilds that were like really, really pushing, but everybody that I know, they were doing, I think it was 135, but they were doing the 135 box. They were calling a day. They were doing it nice and easy. Very few people did Tuscans because you had to bring them to R7 for them to be viable at all, and two of them were brand new. Like you said, the Old Republic, everybody had like G11, G12. They might have gotten Sortie towards the end when Leviathan was kind of announced and people said, oh, well, now I need Sortie. I don't even know if that was the same. I don't know. It bleeds together. I don't even quote me on the timeline there.
It was because Endor was November, and that was well after Leviathan in like July, August.
Okay, so, see? Yeah. All right, I was right. That's what's important. If I was wrong, I'd ask you to shut up, and if I was right, which I was, we'll continue to talk about it. Jawas have always sucked for that raid.
They were bad.
It was tough to do, and then we had Endor, which was a little bit more friendly because we had profundity, and though a lot of profundity bled into the raid. And a lot of people liked it just because it was very quick. But it was a departure, right? Like, you weren't using your kits, you didn't know what was going on, you had to relearn things. There was only really 3 or 4 actual kits in the raid, so you were mixing and matching however you wanted to do it. People like it now, but like you said, people got bored very, very quickly. And it didn't feel like a raid structure. It felt like in that game that we're playing right now, our sponsor game, it felt like that little matching game, right? Yeah. Like, that makes no sense. It's not part of the game at all. And you just go, oh, I'm going to do this other thing that is completely unrelated to the rest of the game that I'm playing.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, like, Naboo is really cool because it's like, I mean, thing one, yeah, it's just a return to the actual game that we know. And thing two, I mean, you know, I've kind of said this before in different places, but I'm really a believer that whenever CG kind of makes good on their word that they want you to use every part of your roster, that's a good thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yes, obviously, would it be preferable for Luminara and Kit Fisto to just become the best characters in the game? Obviously, yes. But that's not going to happen. It's not going to be something that makes sense for Capital Games to do. Yeah. And so to give them this 7.5-ish estimated Endor raid length months to be good and be useful and most importantly be really fun to use.
Yeah.
That's what matters to me, you know, and that's really cool. And so for me, I mean, that's what a lot of this is that you're taking these characters that maybe you didn't use as much. Maybe you had them for something, you know, like Mace Windu and Ayla, probably plenty of people got them to Relic 3 for JMK and kind of just dropped them there.
Yeah.
Right. And now they're kind of wanting to look back at them and be like, okay, well, now these characters are interesting and good to use and like cool. And so it's kind of this revitalization of things that have just kind of been sitting maybe at Gear 11, Gear 12 relics if they're required for something at like the bottom of your roster and being forgotten. And I think this raid is really good at turning all of the things that suck into stuff that's fun. And so it's like really cool.
There's a lot of criticism around the raid, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah. I have gone on record on both ends of the spectrum, and I kind of see both sides, but it's always like people see it as like this black and white issue of like either I really love the raid or I really hate the raid. I have like this love-hate relationship with it. I prefer the direction they went with this raid because it does, even though it takes me a lot longer. Even on auto, my Gungans take 8 minutes or so, which you could do the entire Endor raid in 8 to 15 minutes. Even though it takes me longer, it feels like I'm playing a game a little bit more than it feels like that I'm doing a chore. I obviously do have my critiques. There is a little bit more RNG, and there's like RNG factors that rely on other RNG factors, which kind of feels like shit. But I do think that a lot of the player base has unfairly, kind of alluding to what you were saying before, unfairly criticized it for asking you to relic things that maybe you wouldn't have before. And that goes with every raid, right? Like with Jawas and with Tuskens and with some of the characters like the Ewoks that you needed to do if you really wanted to push out on Endor. You're always going to be asked to do a multitude of teams, from new to reasonable to like, all right, this is out of left field and nobody has this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's that's kind of where I am too. It's like, yeah, some of these teams do suck, right? Luminara and Kit Fisto, those are things that really nobody had. You know, maybe you had R5 on Kit Fisto for the Rise of the Empire mission.
I did.
But probably not. Yeah, I mean, chances are most people weren't, because who the hell cares about 200,000 points?
I did it for the meme. I did it for the let's see if I can do the entire phase on auto, like as a challenge. But I agree, like for most people, it did not make sense to get that.
Yeah, and then there was one Relic 7 Luminara on Tatooine platoons. So there's at least one person in basically any guild who has Reva who's got that Luminara, because, you know, you had to. But that's one person out of 50.
That one lucky
And
person.
You didn't have Kit Fisto. So that's still an investment that you're having to make anyway. And then, so it's like, some of these characters suck. But I mean, I do feel like there's kind of a tendency for every new thing to be the worst thing ever,
Oh
you know.
yes,
And so
absolutely.
then, and people love looking at the with rose tinted glasses at like Great Raid, for example, and saying like, "Oh, Old Republic was so great." It's like, okay, so you really had Mission and Zalbar at Relic 7 ready to go? You know, it's like, no, of course not. If you invested in those characters, chances are you probably had them Gear 11, Gear 12 for Malik.
Yes, and if you did
You
have him
know,
at Relic, you were the exception, not the rule. I think
yeah, and
I absolutely agree with you in that fact, and I've said it on Reddit a ton of times. I do think that sometimes people look at their roster like it is now,
yeah,
and Sortie is a really great example of that, where you look at your Relic Sortie and be like, oh, I have this Relic Sortie. Well, you didn't at the beginning of Crate. You had it maybe
yeah,
in the last month when Leviathan started to have its requirements roll out. Tuskens, most of you didn't have it because two of those Tuskens were barely farmable, right? And you were just finishing those characters. You might have it now. You might have them Relic now. You might have these great teams. But back then, some of these tools didn't exist.
yeah, yeah. Um, Although I will say, there's one thing I've been thinking about it and kind of preparing this point, so I'm going to say it now while we're on the topic. Is there is one issue I have with the raid
Okay.
that specifically Naboo raid that I think is very substantial and important and not relevant to many people because it's about the Relic 8 plus tiers, but it's something that I think is just like a hole I noticed that I'm like they really shouldn't have done it this way, which is we've got three factions, right?
Yes.
We've got the pretty much basically dark side, effectively, right? It's separatists, but Darth Maul and Sidious are there too. We have the Gungans, which are obviously their own self-contained thing, and then Galactic Republic, which I think makes up like 17 units out of our 30. So they're like a pretty sizable chunk, and then proportionally, they're 60% of our teams, right?
Yes.
And the issue is, right, we had this kind of issue with Crate as well, where Old Republic basically you either took them to Relic 5 or you took them to Relic 8. Because at Relic 7, the raid got harder and they didn't get any additional tools to
Yeah.
make anything easier, and they just pretty much did almost worse than they would be doing. They would get like a million, maybe 1.1, maybe 1.3 if you were lucky, you know? And so it was really something you either took it to Relic 5 or Relic 8. And Galactic Republic doesn't have a bonus for the Relic 8 tier
Yeah.
at all. And so for three of our teams, we're kind of in this situation where it's the exact same thing. You either take them to Relic 7 or you go all the way to Relic 9. And that's a really hefty investment, especially considering that the Galactic Republic ones are generally going to be the best characters that most people probably have some good investment into. You know, your Beck, Mason Ayla, and Shakti, like I was saying, Kiadi Mundi, potentially, you know, if you've already had
Especially
him in your
now,
fan.
right? And we'll talk
Especially
about that
now,
later, but
um,
absolutely.
you know, and then Queen Amidala and the two boys, who of course are new, but there's so many reasons that you really should be getting them now if you pretty much give a damn about this game.
And they're
You
both
know,
Cantina farms, so they
and
are
they're both
relatively
Cantina farms.
quick. So then
Yeah,
my
and so
question to you on this, and you can continue your point, but it's very directly relevant to this. And maybe I'm asking. They say don't ask a biased source, so I'm going to ask for a very unbiased opinion. I have Pow and I have Master Qui-Gon at R9. And I have Queen Amidala right now at R7. I have literally no signal data at all. I really don't want to take Quad May to R9, not because I don't think the team will do well. I know that it does. I already almost double the average my guild needs, so I don't need to do more. Is it
yeah,
not worth it for me to just take her to
no,
R8? Or you
it's
think
not.
no? Okay.
No,
So
I
leave her.
think, yeah. I mean, if you were in a situation where you already had the R8 and it was like, you know, I'm getting my 2.34 and it just sucks and it's a slog, should I just get that one extra relic level just for the quality of life of having an easier, more consistent max score?
Yeah.
And just the feeling, because, you know, it does suck to get one wave off of max
Yeah.
consistently every single time, right? So even just the feeling of getting a 3.6 instead of a 2.34, irrespective of the fact that there's an extra 1.5 million points there, pretty much, you know, I would have said to do it, but probably for a Relic 8 upgrade, that's just
It's just not worth it.
paying for.
Yeah, and I do think that that is one of, for an end game or an end game adjacent player, I do think that that is one of the team that's a really great option for R9 for people. I just obviously am in a unique position where I went gung ho on Gungans for like the LOL, like this is fun, like I'm a big part of that factor. So I didn't need those extra points, but I largely tell people it makes more sense to go for that threesome rather than Gungans if you have to make that choice, you know, to R9 because you're going to get those points. I just happen to be in a weird position where I already am doing 8 point some odd million and my guild only needs me to do 5.3. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
it is what it is.
But anyway, kind of returning to that, point that I was making. The thing for me, right, is that Separatists have the Relic 8 bonus, which completely changes them and basically makes them a full auto team at Relic 8, which is cool. I like that part, you know. And the thing I would do is take that Separatist effect and just pull it into the Relic 9 Separatist effect, because it's whenever the leader uses a special to gain 2% defense, which is like, who gives a shit? It's not going to be doing much of anything because you have the Relic 8 bonus that lets you full auto, and so it doesn't really matter. It's not doing anything. So I would have moved that bonus into the Relic 9 tier and moved the Galactic Republic Relic 9 tier effect down into the Relic 8.
Relic 8.
Because then that would have just made things so much better. Because, yeah, it probably would have made the Separatists not able to max. Kind of like the Darth Maul thing, It is not very effective, basically, at all. At Relic 7, kind of even at Relic 8, it's not much better there. If anything, it gets a little bit harder. And then at Relic 9, it pops to being really, really easy. And so, yeah, I mean, I think just for the players, because there's a lot of people probably who want to maybe be looking to make a choice Relic 8 investment into maybe a couple of teams, maybe like for me, myself, I'm taking my Queen Amidala all the way to Relic 9. That's something I'm 100% doing.
Well, you're preaching. I understand it. For anyone listening, Belloq is insane when it comes to this raid, and every single time we're talking on Discord, he's like, I know it's stupid. I know I'm already doing what I need to do for the raid, but I love this raid, and I just want to do my best. So yeah. I figured that you would be doing that.
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing that. But I was looking at potentially doing something else, right? So there's a team that is just super, super cool, which is Luminara, Kit Fisto, Ayla, Sakura, and Grandmaster Yoda. And that basically just gets max score at Relic 7 first try every single time for me. And in fact, I specifically bumped Lumi and Kit up to Relic 7 because that team was just so efficient and so effective. And I was like, this is really cool. And so that was something I was kind of looking at, maybe I take them to Relic 8. Maybe I'll have to put somebody else in there, but I have a Relic 8 Jedi Consular from, Platoons. Yes, he's not very good, but it's something. There's an extra source of damage there to get the counterattacks, to do the things. Probably that team would max, because Ayla's really, really good there. But I don't know. And do I really want to put Relic 8s onto Luminar and Kit Fisto for maybe 900,000 points, but more likely 500,000? No, of course not, But at the same time, I'm not at all in the ballpark of just saying, okay, screw it, I'm going to take Luminara and Kit and Grandmaster Yoda all the way to Relic 9 and do the Relic 9 3-man that exists. I don't care. I'm not going to be doing that. That's just a waste of my resources, if nothing else, because then, that would be something. I mean, even Grandmaster Yoda that I would probably look at once the raid ends and go, why did I do that?
He doesn't need it.
He doesn't need that.
I think I would do more even just for fun. Normally, I'm very big on auto. I'm very big on bringing things up just to auto. I'm a huge proponent of TB Omicrons. I know that that's going to force people to just tune out and call me a charlatan just hearing me say that. But for me, my greatest resource is time. And when that saves me a lot of time, I say, yeah, I'll absolutely do that. In this particular case for myself, I find with all of the content coming up and being a literally just shy of 12 million player, I have to be cognizant of the things that are coming up with Ahsoka. I have to be cognizant of the things that are coming up with Baylan Skoll. And because of the double Cantina farm of Pow and Master Qui-Gon, I literally, for the first time ever, am feeling the signal data crunch. And I know that that's insane for some people, but I've never felt limited by them. I've always felt limited by shards, and by the time I sharded something up, I had the signal data. Now every day I'm like, oh my god, please, just like luck. Like, what's Lady Luck gonna give me today? I need more. I need more. I need more. And I can never get enough. And so I'm scared of over committing to this raid if I'm not gonna get a material gain out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's something as well. I've for one have been in a much tighter crunch than I have, pretty much for years and years because Padawan Obi-Wan, Master Qui-Gon were Cantina farms. I skipped out on Stap because I
wish I did.
One thing and turned into another because it was like, oh, I need some signal data for something else. I don't even remember what it was at this point, but there was something else that I was doing that I was like, this is a little bit more important, especially when looking at the fact that it's going to be like 25 days to get Stap done. And I was like, for a character that, because I didn't have the Lightspeed bundle at the time, the Separatist one.
Yeah.
I do now, but, at the time when I was looking at it, I was like, I don't even have like a Gear
13.
12 or a Gear 13 B2. I've got the rest of them, I guess, So I could do that, but is it really worth my time? Especially because I'm kind of in a similar spot probably where you are, where like I don't look at Grand Arena stuff at all anymore. I used to. I love Grand Arena. I like it a lot, but I'm kind of at that point now where I'm comfortably in Kyber 2 with no risk of falling out of Kyber 3, and unless I severely change the way I approach Conquest, I'm not going to be looking at Kyber 1 ever. So, I don't care about, like, Treya, right? I've gotten some shit from Baroness about, like, oh, Treya's a gaping hole in my roster.
Shout out to UB.
And I'm like, yeah, this is true. I agree. The fact that I don't have Treya Omicron and I don't even have her invested, like, Gear 12 even, is a big deal. That's a big missing spot. But what would it do for me? Yeah, it wouldn't do a single thing, and so I just don't care.
Well,
and
this
Staff
is
was kind of the same thing.
This is a huge thing. I don't know if you watch Scribe stuff at all. I was on with him on Sunday, and I got into a very heated argument with the Wolf. Shout out to him also, because he literally lives 15 minutes from me, about like JML. And I'm glad that you're saying this, because I understand, like you do with Treya, that it does fundamentally alter the team and make the team better. But in my position, bringing R9 JML, it doesn't alter what I'm getting. Just like you getting the Treya Omicron, you're already in K2. You have, I don't want to say you have no desire to be in K1, but you recognize your game style is not going to allow for that. You don't have any benefit as a player, not as a team, but as a player to get those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's pretty much where it falls. And so for me, it was like, Stap, yeah, sure, he's cool, but like, who cares? I was thinking, oh, I might regret this for the raid come, down the line. Ended up not even really mattering that much, really. I mean, Stap is nice. He helps kind of smooth things out. If you want to do the 3-man plus Stap, it makes it way more consistent and stuff. But like, he's not really needed for any scores in the raid.
Yeah.
He's not needed for me for Grand Arena for what I want to do. So I just was like, I'm good. And chances are I'm probably not going to get to him ever. I still haven't farmed Tusken Warrior, because it was just like, I don't have any space for this to fit in. And Tusken Warrior is even a much faster farm than Stap would be.
Well, Stap is a 16, isn't he?
Yeah, he's like, I should say 7D or something.
And it's a team that largely you're not going to use unless you invest in the Omicron.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it doesn't make the team better, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very, very expensive for no reason. And they kind of like tricked us with that. They were like, hey, this new Separatist thing, and everyone at the high end was like, oh, this is going to be needed for the raid. This is going to be important for the raid. And like you said, it's not that he's bad in the raid. It's just you didn't really need to get him. They threw a little trick at us. But I do want to talk to you about a few other things. I didn't want to make this totally about the raid. We do obviously, some stuff came out today. I do want to very quickly touch on that as well. I barely read it. Literally, as I was getting ready to walk out the door, that everything came out, and 12 people were messaging me on Discord, and I was like, I gotta go. All I know right now is they're selling KAM to us for $20. which I personally think is a great price for that one character, especially for how tough he is to get. And they're lowering the difficulty by reducing healing in tier 0 and tier 1 of the raid. Before I ask your opinion on that, is there anything else raid related that's important that I missed?
There's one thing. They fixed the bug. There's some people who this hasn't been a single thing that they've encountered once, like myself, and others for whom I've heard like horror stories that they've never finished a single run, which is the early victory bug, which was something to do. Barbarossa on SWGOH events looked into the code and figured out exactly what was going on. It was an error with the game not loading the ship transition to go into space, and so it would just crash and send you to the victory screen. Right. And so they fixed that. That's gone. It won't happen anymore. You should be able to either die or get all the way to the end on every single run now. And that, I think, is really, really, really important, because there were a lot of people, especially at the top end, who were just like, I can't finish a run at all, ever, you know?
And it sucks that
was the only other thing.
That came out July 2nd. It's now August 14th. That we're talking now, and I get it. I do understand the idea that QA takes time, bugs fixing, finding, doing everything takes time. But when we're talking about very, very, very time-gated content, it does suck that it took up essentially what is about a quarter to a fifth of the time that we're going to be utilizing these teams.
Yeah.
Where it may have screwed over, if it's affecting multiple people in the guild, and it is something that has affected people in my guild. It can significantly alter the boxes that you were going to be getting over those couple of weeks.
Yeah, so that's fixed. That was a good thing, but otherwise, that's pretty much all there was. There was also like a minor bug with in the Gungan like cheering screen. Some people would T-pose sometimes. They fixed that too. Who cares? I never saw it. I wish I had.
I tune out. I don't even.
I wish I had.
When I play this game, and I've said this to people on my Sunday morning streams, I'm like, I don't even see the animations. Like, obviously I see that, but like, to me, it's a means to an end more than it is a cool animation. So it's almost like The Matrix, right? If you've ever seen the original The Matrix, and they're talking about like the ones and zeros and like the coding behind everything. That's almost how I see the game, is like, boom, get in, get out. I don't look at any of that stuff. What is your opinion on the healing change? Do you think that is going? I know that we haven't seen it yet. We don't know how much. Do you feel that's going to really help people?
I think that's going to be good, because I do think one of the biggest complaints, especially from the really, really low players, because I've kind of had a mentality of you kind of just have to adjust to what CG wants, right? And so for them, they were like, this raid is about synergized teams, and so it's not going to be something where you can just take Darth Maul and Ayla and your Plo Koon and get a max score on the lowest tier. That's not going to be happening. And yes, it kind of sucks, right? Obviously, it's not fun to have to go out of your way to do these kinds of things. But considering that basically every single unit that a low GP player would be messing with is something that doesn't need any Kairos, is not any sort of intensive thing, it would probably have been like a 1 or 2 week, grind to get every single team that they might be working with fully synergized and like gear 11, gear 12, And so for me, and I realize it's unfair as a 10.5 million GP player to be like, you should be happy with this. That's,
But like, we look at our old raid scores and our old like sheet, and we look at like the scores that maybe were being made at those lower tiers, and we're saying that we do feel like maybe some of those averages either will be bumped up or at the very least will be more consistent.
Yeah, so I think, for me, it was kind of just a matter of, like, be happy with just buckle down and get your synergized teams. I really think that kind of the mishmash will be something that can kind of make a return on these lower tiers. Because it's, like, minus 90% healing at tier 0. So, I'm sure everybody has the experience of, like, missing killing a B1 by the tiniest little hair, and they just sit there and assist, pop all the way back up to full health and protection. And that shouldn't be something that we see anymore, I think. Fingers crossed for those people,
That's like my Keller and Beck team I run. That's my like offshoot team. Like, it's not synergized. It's whatever. They're all Jedi, but I haven't invested in all of them. Keller and Beck is R7, obviously. KAM is R5, and there's a few others at like R3. I run it at the R1 tier, which I think is tier 2.
Yeah.
Just because I don't need the points and just get what I can get. And even there, watching it sometimes, I'm like, oh, you're Relic 7. Why can't you kill this guy?
Yeah, so I do think that, I mean, obviously, it's a player positive change is a good change.
Yeah.
100% across the board,
Yes.
you know. And I do think that this is a good change, you know, more than just being positive, actually being good, you know, kind of different things. I do think this is a good change that, you know, was warranted. And I think that we're going to see a lot more kind of general happiness with the lower end of the raid.
Good.
So, I mean, I think they did their job.
Going back, and I don't know if Meathead likes to pop into things sometimes, and I do want to make it clear that this isn't necessarily a complaint, because you're right, it's a player positive change, and I am happy with it. But again, it does suck for these players, you know, to be missing out on certain things for what essentially is about 20 to 25% of the lifetime of the raid. Super happy that the change happened, but it kind of lends itself to the, not was it ever tested, but like, was it tested at each level to make sure that each level of player would be able to work with this, not just the mid-tier, not just the high end. So I do feel for those players, but again, it is 100% a positive change. But looking at it, I was like, all right, this looks good, but I don't know how much because I'm not as involved as you are.
Yeah.
Now, what about KAM?
KAM is interesting.
Okay.
Because for me, I think, first off, I think it's great. I was in this unique position, of course. I don't have KAM. I'm not even close. I think I'm at like 50 out of 85 because I've kind of been on again, off again, farming him out of GT3 and just hating every second of it because it's just so many lost Kairos. And it's just, because for me, it's, you know, it's the opportunity cost of Kairos. I don't care about how long it would take necessarily, but it's the fact that it's like, I think I did the math earlier today, and for 0 to 330, it's 2,337 Kairos from scratch. And it takes like 13 months. And it's like, that's ridiculous, you know. That's just completely unfair to people to have to trade away like a GL plus worth of Kairos for a character who's okay. I mean, he's good.
Yes.
That's about it.
I just upgraded him. I had him. I've had him for 2 years. I just upgraded him to Relic 5 for the raid because I don't need him. I have heard he unlocks, like he gets so much stronger at Relic 7, but other than the raid, I don't need him, so I've never done it. And for a player in my position, I have 1,500 of both Kyrotech. I am just feeling where I don't feel a Kyrotech crunch anymore. I'm assuming, because I was at your point not very long ago, 6 months ago, 10 months ago, you're still feeling that. Right? Like, absolutely. So that hurts to have to give up that much Kyrotech.
Exactly. I mean, like, I was just starting to buckle down and be like, okay, I'm going to do it for the raid. And then I kind of looked at the math, which maybe you vaguely remember, me being like, you know, it's barely possible for me to get Jar Jar if I halt everything that I'm doing and
that was
just
a few weeks ago,
Kairos. Yeah. And I made it. I got there. But it was only through sacrificing KAM again. You know, I wouldn't have been able to do it if not for just dropping it and going back into just fully focusing Kairos with every single possible source I could get it through, you know. And so it's like, there was another one of those instances of like, I was just barely able to make those Kairos in time. And I'm fully out right now. My Jar Jar is still gear 11, you know.
But the bet paid off for you because now
it paid off in full. Yeah.
Very surprised.
I'm surprised too. Yeah,
I'm not surprised that they're selling it to us because I do get it. It is it's a character that is largely unattainable. It's unrealistic to ask people to go back to LSTB. I do think they should have put that mission into ROTE and let people continue to farm them. They didn't do it, obviously. But when the information first came out, I was telling people like, hey, don't be surprised if this is an expensive bundle. Don't be surprised if it's $50 for one character or even more. I was very surprised that it was only $20.
100%. Yeah, no. Because like I was kind of, going in, like, I'm in the unique position. KAM is literally the only thing that I realistically can't just farm and get, and without some major sacrifice, right? So that was really the one thing that it was like, I can get everything else. If I really just kind of sat and focused and put my mind towards everything, I could probably be done with this game within the next year or so, and pretty much just only be catching up with old content, or with new content, keeping up with it, that is. And KAM was pretty much the one thing that was like not the case.
I'll never get that.
So I was in the position of either just, giving up on him entirely, or just kind of hoping that, they were going to sell him. And I was seriously sitting there thinking like, I'd be willing to pay $50, $60, maybe $70 even, really, because like I'm that desperate for this guy, just for completion's sake, and just for the fact that this is the only thing that, as a heading towards 11 million GP player, I cannot get.
Yeah.
So I was expecting it to be like a huge premium.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was just not.
Huge. Now, do you think, because I was thinking about this earlier too, and I've already had this discussion multiple times, do you, as a cursory, quick glance, I'm not going to hold it to you because this is the day it came out, do you feel like this signals that he is going to be an Ahsoka requirement, or you think that
Absolutely
this is
not.
probably... So you think it's probably...
I have one reason why. I think it is just for the raid, and that is because day and date with the KAM Lightspeed Bundle, they're re-releasing the Jedi Allies Lightspeed Bundle, the Louis Kit one, right? So I fully think, I was kind of up in the air being like, I could see it being for raid. I could also kind of seeing it be something that they're going to be like, okay, well now everybody has KAM, we can require him. But I really think, the fact that they are literally releasing that bundle alongside the old raid bundle makes me think that their goal here, their goal here is just to be like, see how bad you want these bundles? Don't you want to score well in the raid? Haven't you suffered for the last month and a half? Don't you want this easy score? You probably regret not having bought this bundle and getting this other guy alongside it, Yeah, and effectively, they're making a $40 bundle.
I wish now with I kind of regret not buying the bundle. I obviously I didn't buy it, and I ended up signal dating those guys up afterwards, and I was like, oh, well, like shit, for $20, like I would not be in a signal data crunch right now if I bought that bundle, because I had to bring so many characters, even some of them from G12 to Relic 5, but even just from like Relic 2 to Relic 5, it was a lot. Yeah, so I think I would be way more uncertain if not for the fact that they're also just repackaging and reselling that same Jedi Allies bundle at the exact same time. With that, I really think, obviously the possibility is there. Of course.
But
I'm not holding you to it.
That would have been, I really feel like that's just such an out there requirement too, when they have so many good options for actual kind of thematic requirements, and also a lot more kind of fuck you requirements, right? The ones people throw around, Clone Wars Chewbacca, because there was like a whole episode with him there, and Coruscant Underworld Police, right? Those two really are like the premier options that it's like they can go even to those types of characters, right? And then you have like Barriss, you have all the Phoenix, which of course we just got Ezra revealed as a requirement today. We have,
to be clear, to people who haven't seen that yet, old
Relic
Ezra,
5 Ezra,
not new Ezra.
Yeah, old Ezra, not the
I guess
one.
Original Ezra,
young Ezra,
not old.
Not the old. Yeah,
exactly. To be clear to anyone who hasn't seen that yet. I'm not as big into EU. I'm not as big into Clone Wars. Not to say I haven't watched. Like, I'm getting through it. I am watching, and I do have a hard time like watching things at home. It's not about the quality. It's literally about, I'll sit down and watch the show, and then I'm like on my phone, and I'm like on Discord, and I just can't get through things. But from what I have seen from Reddit, KAM essentially was the person who found Ahsoka, or like brought her into the Jedi Order. Or...
I think so, yes. So there's that. But like in terms of characters she's actually interacted with outside of just being a little child and not really knowing anything, right? That's a cursory thing, kind of just like a side
That's the
offhand
lore
mention.
you pull in as the
Yeah,
fuck you,
that's like
right?
that's
Okay.
yeah, that's like, oh, Jabba requires Qui-Gon Jinn because he was at the speeder or at the race. It's like
The
no,
Punta Eve or whatever it
yeah,
was, yeah.
yeah, whatever. So yeah, it's like I feel like Cam being required for Ahsoka is enough of an out there requirement that there's so many better options to choose from, and I don't think that this really means anything, and that it's just for the
Okay.
raid, But I
And
mean, who
not
knows?
gonna,
I'm
not gonna
fully
hold it
prepared to
to
eat
it.
my words. Yeah, I'm prepared to eat my words
I have
100%.
learned my guild leader, he tells me I'm wrong every single time. And it's been a while since I've talked to him about this specifically, but in the past I've tried to like predict patterns, and every single time, like the day that I'll say no, this will never happen is always the day that it's like, oh, by the way, we're releasing this information. And I go, oh, well, fuck. Like, of course this is the day that I'm getting all of these things coming out. Why didn't I wait 3 hours to message him back? Now, before I left for work, we were talking very briefly, and I had to stop you. I was like, fucking stop. No, we can't have this conversation on Discord right now. You and I are in very opposite camps when it comes to Ahsoka itself, and this is very raid related. I firmly believe that Ahsoka is the signal for the next raid. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what you had said on
I'll
Discord,
say it.
you don't.
I don't. 100% I do not.
Okay.
Because I think I was kind of looking at it and kind of mocking up like what kind of teams and things could they require, and just kind of thinking about what could the raid be.
Okay.
And the stuff I was coming up with was basically just saying, get every single new thing that we're releasing for the next 5 months and we're going to be seeing, and that's the only content they can really use.
Yes.
And at that point, first off, that you're going to struggle to find 5 full teams that are doing everything, right? And I just can't believe, CG's willing to be mean, of course. I can't believe they would be so mean as to have a team of like 25 characters and have like 17 of them be new.
Yeah.
Right. At that level, especially when there's a galactic legend, an epic confrontation character, a whole bunch of marquees, I really do not think that we are going to be seeing a raid structure for it. My personal bet is that we are going to be seeing a bonus zone in Rise of the Empire.
Okay.
And that it's going to be something like Balin unlocks it, and then there's going to be a mission for Ahsoka on there. And that it's going to be like a pretty important... I think that, we saw kind of Zepho was like, the rewards are good. Yeah. It was kind of hard to get to, I know in my guild, personally,
Zepho
has not
sucks.
yet quite gotten there. The missions are cool looking. They're kind of, they're a good homage to the game. But like the planet's rewards are okay. Mandalore has some really good rewards, a full Cairo tech every single 2 weeks, 200 Kairos a month, basically, for having a character who's already really good at a relic level where it makes sense. Because, you have Beskar Mando at Relic 7 for Bo. You have a different, Mandalorian at Relic 7 for Bo. So it's just basically get her and Relic 7 her. And so it's easier in terms of the requirements.
Which is interesting. Well,
yeah.
Not even in terms of just the mission itself. The get to Mandalore mission
so that's what I was saying.
So
the mission is easier. The requirement, 25 instead of 30, and the rewards are better.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're going to see bonus zones. They're kind of testing the water to see like where are they going to go with this. I really think that we see a Peridia bonus zone that really has some good stuff on it. Potentially even like the next Shard character,
I want to see that. I would like I miss trying to unlock as much as it's a pain in the ass to organize a guild and convince a guild to farm this character to get a new character. I do miss the focus on a mission, and I do miss oh man, like I finally unlocked this character. Whether it's through a raid or whether it's through a bonus zone. My counter argument, and this is kind of just going to lead to where you think we're going. Right now we have presumably all of the marquees known for Ahsoka. I say presumably because typically they tell us the names of them all right away. But they could throw us for a loop and maybe there's somebody else. We don't know 2 sets of the requirements so far. There's 4 sets of requirements. There's 2 sets that are still unknown. My guild leader actually, shout out to Tish today, pointed out to me that the store in the game is updated until September 16th, which typically means we're not going to be getting any type of like real update until mid-September. Maybe we'll get like a small thing, but like nothing major. That usually means that. So if I were to figure like 9/16 is the day that we get the 3rd set of requirements, and if we even look at 3 weeks later as being the 4th set of requirements, so 9/16 to like maybe the 1st week of October, the 2nd week of October being Ahsoka's release, and that's actually earlier than they've signaled. They said like end of year, November, December. And based on our raid cadence, we're looking at Naboo ending sometime around February. We need a new raid. Like, they're gonna have to fit that in a very short amount of time.
So that's where I kind of think, like, I think basically there's just not enough stuff to last us until December, basically, is kind of my way of thinking, right? We have, presumably, like you were saying, all the marquees for Ahsoka herself. We know Great Mothers is coming.
Yes.
Everybody's pretty much expecting that Shin is going to be accompanying Baylan as a requirement. I'm personally suspecting that we see like a Jedi training Sabine as another requirement. You know, because they said they were going to be building out like a new team for Ahsoka.
Yes.
So I feel like that's a pretty good way, require Jedi training Sabine for Baylan. So then it's basically a secret 17th requirement for Ahsoka, and you have to do both, and you have to be keeping up. And then it's kind of a bone for anybody who's keeping up with the stuff, because then if a Peridia bonus zone does happen, then hey, you've got both things just by going for one thing, So I think that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, that's what, 3 more marquees?
Yes.
Between now and like December-ish. Of course, it's going to be out before, because then it gives them some time.
December, they generally go radio silent. Like mid-December to like end of January is basically a dead zone.
Yeah, so like early December. So let's, that's still like 2.5 months for like 3 characters. That's just not enough time. And I think looking at the Gungan schedule, right? They were announced in February and kind of released pretty regularly until May.
Yes.
I see the way they could realistically fill the space is kind of starting to go into something new before finishing Ahsoka all the way.
Okay.
And sort of prepping stuff and getting the stuff sort of situated so that as people are realistically kind of wrapping up their Ahsoka farm and just waiting around for it to actually, for marquee farming and for the actual event to come out, then they can start working their way towards a new faction, or, in the case of the Tuskens, building out something old and getting ready for a different raid, and basically taking a hard left and going somewhere else while they kind of just fill time for Ahsoka to come out.
So then we're looking at if the patterns, and I'll remind you that I'm always wrong. My guild leader will tell you, every time you say something, it's always wrong. But just based on the patterns, we're looking at a raid February, March. Where would you, I don't want to say where do you think, but where would you most hope that we go with that if it's not Peridia?
I don't know.
That's a big question.
Jeez, I haven't thought about that at all.
I'm always thinking 5 months ahead. I'm never thinking about what's coming out now. So while you think about that, and think about it a little bit, but we talk about like Peridia. We have seen not Naboo, Endor, which was more. The majority of the characters reasonably like, oh, they were definitely on Naboo. Endor. I always mix the two up. I don't know why. Right, like this character was here for a week. They were on vacation, but they were here. And then you have the crate raid where it was more like, well, it's this whole faction, it's that whole faction, it's this whole faction, it's most of these guys. My thought is with Peridia that you can use all of Phoenix, you can use all of Imperial Remnant, you can use all of Night Sisters, and you have 3 factions right there that have old built out teams, but then also the new tools as well.
Yeah, and I did consider that and kind of look at, looking into like old Night Sisters, old Imperial Remnant, well, old DTMG is not exactly, old entirely, but
old adjacent, old-ish.
Yeah. Phoenix, I feel like, are too far removed to count. I think that would be something where they would start kind of specifically just saying, like, Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra, done. Rather than, because, like, Rex never went to Peridia. If you don't have Rex, then the whole team is just a wash.
The whole team falls apart.
Yeah. So, I really don't think that Rex would make it there. But, yeah, I mean, if they expanded it, I could see that being likely. But, like, we didn't get I'm a Gundai, the anti-droid specialist
Which
Jedi.
Which really, it actually
Naboo.
pisses me off that he's not in there.
Yeah.
And we obviously, everybody who's a Star Wars fan knows I'm a Gundai. His name is literally I'm Gonna Die. And, like, that was on purpose. And he dies in his episode, spoiler alert. I was convinced going into this raid that not only was he going to be part of the raid, but he was going to have hero synergy like Fives, where, like, he would die and give the rest of the team bonuses, and it would be an awesome nod to him in the show. So I'm really annoyed that they didn't capitalize on that.
See, I wouldn't have even thought of that. It's just he's the anti-droid specialist. His whole kit is anti-droid, and the whole thing is being like he's really good against droids, and he's one of the 2 Galactic Republic Jedi we couldn't use. That's not like Kenobi and all of the like good ones, And so it was like a really glaring hole. Like Barriss made sense because she was a Padawan, she was really young, right, and during Naboo kind of era, but like I'm a Gundai was missing for seemingly no reason, and so I personally find it hard to believe that the same kind of team that designed that decision turns around and says, "Yeah, Mara can go to Peridia. That's all good,"
Okay, I mean it's fair.
Yeah, So I don't know. I feel like the only way they really can make Peridia a justifiable raid is by kind of doing the thing that with Naboo they kind of showed they're not willing to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll see. Who knows? I'm prepared to eat my words on that one too. Like
a lot of people think that I don't like to be disagreed with or be wrong, and obviously nobody likes to be wrong, but I don't. When you're talking on like Reddit or on Discord and it's just text, there's always like that disconnect of I'm not mad at you, I'm just countering your point, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm having this discussion, I enjoy having this discussion because it's 2 adults like talking about where their idea is coming from and meeting in the middle, and I don't agree with you at all. But it's an adult discussion where you have your points that make sense, and I have my points that whether or not they make sense to me, right? And we'll see in February. We'll see in March.
We'll see. I mean, let's be real. We'll see it earlier than that. Once they start kind of revealing Balin, I feel like is when we're gonna start seeing them start to trickle the information more our way and be like, hey, you better not have missed out on this last month of Ahsoka farming because you're gonna need her real soon.
For something. She's definitely gonna be there for something.
She's gonna be there something. Yeah. And I'm predicting the economy event for her to be really good because of how expensive she is. I really feel like this is going to be something, they were willing to give away Relic 9 materials for a couple of marquees.
Yeah.
I really feel like for a Galactic Legend who requires 2 Relic 9s on top of whatever else they're going to reveal, and a Relic 8, which granted, gas as a Relic 8 is something that, most of us have taken care of for Lord Vader.
Yes.
But even so, I feel like we probably see, I've said before, I think we're going to see General Kenobi at Relic 8, which again is another gimme relic because it kind of mirrors the gas. Yeah, but I think we potentially even see a third. I think we're not going to see 3 Relic 9s. I think Fulcrum's going to be a Relic 8, personally. But
that's interesting. I think that Fulcrum's going to be a Relic 9, and I'm pissed off. I'm not pissed off. I expect it, but my Fulcrum isn't even Relic right now. So I'm like,
yeah, mine's not either. But yeah, so I think they're not going to quite, we had Commander Ahsoka and, Snips, who are like some of the most Relic units in the game, right? So I feel like pushing them all the way to Relic 9 made a lot of sense. I feel like Fulcrum is a character that they haven't really, not many people have.
Yeah.
I think Arnold made a video predicting all the requirements back when we first got like the hub that they haven't updated a single time. And he was saying like there's like 30,000 fulcrums at Gear 13 compared to like 136,000 Commander Ahsoka Tano's.
Yes.
You know, and so it's like I really find it hard to believe that they would go all the way, right? When Relic 8 is kind of equally as mean. So considering that's a full Relic, Gear 12 Relic 1 to Relic 8 upgrade. Whereas most people were probably doing, R5 to R9 on Snips, R7 or R8 to R9 on Commander Ahsoka. And so I feel like they were pushing the envelope there because those are such highly reliced characters. And so for something like Fulcrum Belt, it's still a lot. Like a full Relic 8 is a lot of stuff still. But, it's not as much just because so many less people have it, already kind of ready. And so it's a much more significant investment for a lower relic level.
I think you touched on a really important point, and I could probably spend an hour just talking on this point itself. But one thing that this actually mirrors the raid, but Galactic Legends themselves mirror the raid in that there is a very distinct. I don't think pattern is the right word for it, but there's a very distinct form to how they release these Galactic Legend requirements. And there's always the marquees, right? The new marquees that are generally R5 or R7. There is always the pain in the ass characters, the characters that nobody ever wants to bring up to relics. And I don't know if Fulcrum fits into that, because I know that Fulcrum can be pretty good if you Omicron her, but it's somebody that most people don't have. And then you have the characters that are very friendly to veteran players, right? So Kat is a great example. Someone who's at 4 or 5 million might be like, this sucks. But for most people who should be going for Ahsoka, they're like, oh great, mine's R7 already, because of the whole JMK meta. Gas, even if you don't have Lord Vader, he's just a great character, and most people brought him to R7 or to R8, right? So characters like that, or like General Kenobi, if General Kenobi is part of the requirements, that's like one of the give-me's for the majority of the player base that are going to go after her right away. And I will say that this episode of Tales has the distinction of having the most shout-outs from me, but like Cunctator, who has no reason going for Ahsoka, but he just loves Ahsoka so much that he's like, I'm going for her. There's just like this, again, pattern's not the right word, but there's just this form of like, these are the mean requirements, these are the expected marquee requirements, and these are the requirements that most people, it's almost a gimme.
Yeah, and another thing I have kind of been, sort of mentally debating, is whether this is kind of a fake out from CG. Not entirely, because ultimately these are still really high requirements, but, I almost wonder if part of their goal is to kind of just scare people away and be like, oh, here's Relic 9, Relic 8, tons of Relic 7s, and that the final two sets are maybe going to be a little bit easier.
Okay.
With Leia, if you kind of looked at the sets as they went along, it was like, I think, Rex and Nisa in the first set, but otherwise it was like Wicket and Rolo and Admiral Akbar. So it was like 3 and 3 and 5. And they kind of ramped it up as things went along. And then the set 3 release was CLS at Relic 7, and Chupio at Relic 7, and Drogon at Relic 7, and then a couple other Relic 5 requirements. And so they kind of ramp things up. I almost wonder if they're going to do something in reverse, where they're starting with all the high relics, and they're kind of trying to make people be like, oh, this is too hard, I can't do this. And then they kind of ease off the gas a little bit, and we see all the Relic 5s and 3s that we're kind of familiar and used to seeing come into the later two sets. And so then people have now lost a month, and they're like, okay, well, you know what? All in all, this is not that much worse,
I wasn't with you on this until that last part. I was like, no, there's no way they would do that. Doesn't make sense. Until you kind of signaled like, hey, it kind of almost tricks people into saying, oh, actually, and then it almost fucks them over.
And then it's just spending. It's a spending. Exactly.
Yes. I think it's going to mirror gas and just be very difficult. And I do think that there's going to be another R9 just because the relic economy is so different from when Lord Vader came out. I think I said gas before, but I meant Lord Vader.
You did.
We have the new raid structure, which gives us way more relics. We have Duel of the Fates, which I don't understand why Duel of the Fates came out. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And you said before, giving an economy event to just these two random marquees. I think we're in a position where if you're a mid to high tier player, so kind of in that maybe like 10 million, maybe 9.5 to like where I'm at and above, it's not that Relic 9 is easy. It most certainly is never easy, but it's not as daunting as when Radis came out. And we're like, okay, we'll do it because it's my first R9, but oh, this really hurts to do.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's like I said, I was debating. It's not like I'm confident, like they're going to do this. I don't know. You know, like I could completely see them just kind of keeping the pace because, like you were saying, you know, we are in a different era than like Lord Vader, you know, and I could see them kind of doing where, like Lord Vader, right? I feel kind of in retrospect was pretty clearly kind of a test, right? Get a really, really popular character everybody's looking forward to. You know, Fallen Anakin was like the most required or requested character for years and years and years, and then make the relics just painful and see how many people go for him. And they didn't, and then they knocked it back down.
And the interesting thing about Lord Vader, there's two interesting things. One, he doesn't suck. I don't call him Lord Failure. I defend him constantly. I think he's a great character. I enjoy my Lord Vader. I use him constantly. But his animations are boring as hell.
They're so bad.
But JMK's are just as boring, right? That whole set, his high ground is literally the same as Lord Vader's whatever you call his.
They kind of do a little hand movement and that's it.
Yeah, it's the same thing, but we give that pass to JMK because he's a little easier to get. But the interesting distinction with Lord Vader is that his marquees came out well before he was announced. So
JMK?
Not JMK, Lord Vader.
No, I'm saying, did JMK have any either?
No, so JMK's bow came out, but he only had one. He only had Bo-Katan, but it came out with the release of JMK and with the announcement of JMK.
Because I feel like that was a little bit before with like Armorer when they were building out the Mandalorian thing more than for JMK, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
I want to say that I'm 95% sure. To where while we're talking, I'm going to look down at my phone and I'm going to do research.
Yeah, no, because I know Bad Batch came out in like February.
But Bad Batch was its own release.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, hey, by the way, we're doing this thing. So even though they were a Kyrotech like heavy team, we had a significantly longer time to farm them.
Yeah.
Quercetan, and you keep going, and I will interject once I find this.
I feel like I do want to say I remember Bo being part of the Mandalorian push and kind of being around the time of Armor rather than JMK.
318. 318 is when she.
Okay, yeah, and JMK I want to say was in the game in July of the same year.
Yes.
So somewhere
around there.
So yeah, it was like 4 months in advance. Obviously, that's a little bit, bookended by Bad Batch and Lord Vader, respectively. So it was a larger gap, but I do want to say that wasn't for JMK explicitly.
Jedi Master Kenobi he literally released June 16th. So there would be a 3 month
probably.
Gap. So I'm going to say that she probably was.
I want to say, yeah. Then you're probably right.
Because you're looking at like 3 to 4 sets of requirement, or whatever it is, with 3 weeks in between. Yeah. So it would be, it was very likely, and I'm not going to sit here and say hold on for 10 minutes. It was very likely that they did a State of the Galaxy or whatever it's called and announced him and said, by the way, Bo-Katan. But he was the last one that had a single marquee. There were a couple that had 2 before. But he was the last one that was like kind of easy and like, hey, you only have to get this one character. Other than newer characters. But the difference is obviously that after JMK and that area, the larger amount of the veteran players, it's really hard to find characters we don't have relicked.
Yeah. And it's getting harder all the time because then, it's like they require them for some small side thing. Like, I mean, at this point, like, I don't think it was an accident that Barriss just happened to be missing out of this set. Because, there's the justification of, like, oh, she was a Padawan, she wasn't really on Naboo. But, it just so happens that she's, like, candidate number 1 for Ahsoka that we haven't seen yet, as, like, an old requirement. I think probably her and 501st Rex are like the 2 characters that I would be very surprised if they're both,
if they're not,
not required. So
Barriss is, I think, a front runner. A lot of people, I've seen a lot of lists. Barriss seems to kind of be at the top of almost everybody's, just because of everything that happened between them, and I do think it is a very formative part of her character arc. Everything that happened with Barriss. I do think that she's going to be largely very difficult to get overall, just to kind of summarize everything that we've been saying here. But again, with the relic economy being very, very, very different, I think that someone in my position, someone in your position if you really want to, someone in like that 9+, it's not the most, it's not going to be the most daunting thing in the world. Whereas when Lord Vader came out, everybody was in a Kyrotech crunch. And it was like, oh, like crap, like this is a lot of R8s, and this is a lot of Kyrotech to devote to this one character. And then he ended up being one of the least adapted galactic legends for a very long time. I haven't looked at the numbers in a considerable amount of time, but I don't think it was because he sucked. I don't think it's because of Arnold. I think it was because he was
just hard.
He was hard. And
I mean, I remember already... I remember it being a big thing that, like, people were already kind of looking at JMK to a degree and kind of going, like, Relic 8 is almost too much for me right now. That's kind of a lot, that's really difficult. I could probably swing it, but it'll be rough, because I remember, I think CPIC came out February of that year. So it had been something where Relic 8 was still relatively new, and obviously he came out, Lord Vader did in, like, September, so it had been a while for people to build their stockpiles and stuff. But, I mean, that really meant you had to be at, like, the cutting edge of, like, being CPIT ready day 1. And, and you remember how awful that was, having to sit there and be like, can we post damage yet?
I actually credit. So people who are newer to the game that might be watching, because, a lot of people on our Discord are newer to the game who weren't there or playing the original CPIT. It was more like a traditional massive multiplayer game where everybody had to be on together. So Saturday night, I remember I'd be sitting in bed with my wife watching like TV, and I'd be sitting on my phone, and because apps would refresh constantly, I'd be on Discord and then back in the game. On Discord, back in the game.
Yeah.
On Discord, back in the game. And I credit that raid with being the reason I have no time anymore, because my guild leader essentially made me the CPIT officer, and his requirement was, you talk a lot, this raid is boring, it's gonna take 2 hours every time we do it, I just need someone that's gonna talk constantly in chat.
And keep people entertained.
And just keep people, like, engaged for 2 hours while we're doing these stupid phases. And if not for that raid, maybe I wouldn't be creating I'd be creating Reddit content at least still, definitely. Yeah. But I definitely would be way less involved with this game. It was tough. And that was the only way to get arrow magnifiers. So for a lot of people, it was out of...
I know I wasn't, one of those people who was like day 1 at the forefront of stuff, So, like, I mean, for me, it was kind of a similar thing. I remember looking at the Jedi Master Kenobi requirements and going like, I'll never get this guy, Because I had 1 GL to my name. I was just like JML, and I was like 3 million GP or something, just looking, being like, okay, I'm never going to get this guy. And then Lord Vader has double the requirements on top of no Relic 3s, on top of more Relic 7s, and it's just like, no, it's just not going to happen. And then of course kind of they clearly took a step back from that because they saw that people just said no, and so they relaxed the requirements. I'm willing to bet that if JMK and Lord Vader had equal acquisition rates, Jabba and Leia would not have been what they were.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I feel like they're pushing the envelope. One, because there's kind of just been a very clear, concentrated push to get anyone other than spending players to get Relic Nines. But I also think that Ahsoka is going to be another test kind of character because Ahsoka is a very, very highly requested galactic legend. I'm a bit surprised they didn't decide to do this for like Revan. Because I've been predicting for years that they would just make Revan and then just go just fucking balls to the wall with just the worst requirements you've ever seen. But timing wise, it also just makes sense, for Ahsoka with Ahsoka show and everything kind of being about a year old. So it makes sense that she was kind of the test character for this. But I really do expect that if we see her kind of fall into where Lord Vader was, that the next Galactic Legend, they kind of take a step back from the Relic Nines. Yeah.
Again, just with the economy, I think it is different. So I do agree it is a test, and they're kind of saying, okay, we're in a different place. Let's see if this works now rather than before. For anyone, again, watching the Reddit sleuths, I don't go back and, get my comments or whatever. Yeah. But I know for a fact I have, at least a dozen comments where I have said... after Jabba, there will be one set of There will be one set of GLs. So Leia, and I say set just because Jabba, even though it kind of is a thematic two, they were like, oh, this is where we're gonna decide that we don't have to do that anymore, and then they did that anyway, just a year later. After whatever comes after Jabba, it's gonna be Ahsoka Thrawn. And I've been saying that for a very long time as a very definitive thing. I was not at all surprised by Ahsoka. I am not an Ahsoka fanboy, but I defend her beyond anything else for when you look at her entire story. It makes sense for her to be in this position.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not surprised. With kind of this knowledge that this galactic legend is the test for how hard they could make it, I'm really surprised that it wasn't Revan. Just given, I feel like that would be the one where they could, get people to do it anyway. And then they could point to the numbers and say, see, we can keep doing this.
We can keep it going.
Because, I feel like if people said, hey, you have to Relic 9 both Bastila Shans and Jolie, they'd be like, fuck, okay.
We'll do it.
I'll do it. I would do it. I would 100% do it.
I personally, I do need to revisit those games. I am upset that the remake was canceled. Not necessarily because I was a huge fanboy of the game. I was playing a lot of RPGs at that time period. I was not the biggest fan of KOTOR. I didn't think it was very interesting compared to other RPGs that were coming out at that time. I recognize a lot of players who have played it later. They love it, and I didn't hate it. I did enjoy it. It's not like my hate of Fallen Order, which I just don't think is a great game at all. Yeah. But I would love to have the time to go back and reassess it as an adult, because people love those games just so much.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing for me, because I'm going to say something you're not happy with. That game's older than I am.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah, really right. Is. So that game came out, a year before I was born. So I only played it when I was 13, 14, in 2018, 2019, somewhere around that range, So in reality, it feels like of all the people, to think that game's kind of overrated and not that good, it would be me, because it would be something that I could compare.
What year was it that, just because you seem to know, it was 2004, 2005 that game came out originally?
2003. It was October 2003, something like that, yeah.
So I was a sophomore in high school, in sophomore, junior, depending on the month when it came out. And so for you saying that for being overrated or the idea that maybe it would be overrated, I actually think it's the opposite. And the only reason that I do is just because when you played the game, gaming culture was very different. When I played the game, it was the age of JRPGs.
Yeah.
Like that was everything coming out, and all of them were critically acclaimed. So when I played it, it was more like, okay, well, great. I've played 10 other games that are better than this and are similar.
And that's kind of an interesting thing, though, because I always have been a really big JRPG fan. Even when I was a little kid, my mom introduced me to like Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
I remember I picked up just randomly at a garage sale when I was like 6 or 7 because I had a Game Boy Advance. That wasn't the first system I got. I started with like the DS when I was like 6 or whatever. But I got a Game Boy Advance. Yeah, I had a Game Boy Advance like really early on, and I picked up like the Final Fantasy 1+2 like GBA remake, and I played the fuck out of that game. I seriously, I think if I remember correctly, I maxed like every file in both of those games, right? So I played the game, I played both games 4 times each, right? I loved those games. And so, I really have always kind of been that JRPG turn-based combat type of person. So I honestly, in a lot of ways, kind of did have the gaming experiences that were, sort of similar to that. I guess the only difference that is very concrete and very, substantial there is that I was kind of going into the game that's been the 20-year most critically acclaimed RPG of all time. So there was that. Like I was aware of it. You understand that
going in.
I did, know that everybody thought it was a good game, but even so, it really was a game that I think just captured me and was like really, really cool. And it was the most I've ever felt like I was the Star Wars character, because like in pretty much every other game you play as someone else. But in this game it was always it's you you get to choose your name. They later decided there was a canon name of Revan, but it was you were the guy who, and then of course spoilers for the 20-year-old game, then when they go into the real reveal of like you've lost your memory, you were the bad guy, and it was a legitimate reveal to you. And it was so cool. He pulls off the mask and it's your player character and you're like, oh fuck,
that's me. Like,
it was really, really
and it was
cool.
a cool reveal. And don't get me wrong, so like when it comes to like Fallen Order and Survivor, I'm not a big fan of those games at all, and I could spend hours talking about that. I'm not gonna waste time doing that right now. When it comes to KOTOR, while I wasn't impressed with it because of the gaming culture or what I was playing at the time, it still is a good game, right? I still do look fondly on it and be like, like I had fun playing it. I'm not like an I hate Knights of the Old Republic. I'm not there. I do get the love for those characters. And I don't fight people when they go, oh man, I love Revan, like in Darth Revan, they're so great, and Malik and all these guys. I do understand it. I just think that for myself, it wasn't just in the right place. And I would like to go back and play it, but I don't have a PlayStation 2 anymore. And they didn't remake it. And, so it's...
New PC on Steam, $10.
Hey, when we do this, maybe I can do that, because my PC literally would blow up. But when we deal with that stuff, maybe I'll get a little bit back into gaming again. With that said, I want to end on one thought with you. I'm always interested when I talk to younger people about Star Wars. So I grew up in Star Wars in the 90s, which is obviously after the originals. But the Star Wars in the 90s was when the special editions were coming out. So I did see them all in the theaters, right? Like I don't know if they were my first experiences, but I witnessed them in the theaters. And yes, they were changed, and yes, they're not like the same, and purists like they shouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah.
I did experience it in order. I had to wait years and years for Phantom Menace. Like I had to deal with all of that. You didn't have to deal with that as much. What I guess my first question really is, did you watch it in its original order? Like, did you start with 4, 5, 6? How did
So
that work?
that's the interesting. I don't know
Okay.
because um, I live in Michigan and all my mom's family lives in Texas, and so
Okay.
every year, pretty much since I was born, more or less, we've gone down every summer and winter, and so those were the movies I watched in the car, on the way
Okay.
down. So I genuinely do not remember when I watched those movies for the first time. They've just
It's like
been
a
in my life for literally as long as I can remember.
okay.
So I have no clue what my first viewing was. You know, knowing my family, it was probably 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Because my
Hmm.
mom was a pretty, she's not like the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, but she kept up with it. She was born the same year that the A New Hope came out, so she was young, kind of growing up literally into Star Wars as it was sort of releasing,
Yes.
and stuff. And so she was always kind of in that experience. So I want to say, knowing her, I expect she probably showed it to me in,
In
release
that
order,
order.
but I have no idea.
It's just interesting to hear about like even your mom's generation, and just because like my brother is literally the same age as your mom. He was born 1977. My nieces are 15 and 17, so just slightly younger than you is my oldest niece, and he is a diehard, like he is a Star Wars purist. Anytime I go upstate, he will tell me the new sequels have retroactively destroyed his love for Star Wars. That's and I'll hear it every single time I go upstate. That's how serious he is about his Star Wars. And one, it kills my soul to realize there is a generation before me that is still, they're older but still fairly young. But two, it's just interesting even to think about like the three generations of like what they grew up with versus what I grew up with versus what you grew up with, and how it might be different or similar, and even if you don't remember, but we're all here kind of experiencing this
Mess of the
crazy
series.
IP like
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. That's pretty much what I was doing. Yeah. And then it was a whole thing as well. I did not like the sequels. I mean, that's not a controversial opinion.
It really
I
isn't. You're
Yeah, I watched all those movies because that was a thing, in fact, that my family went yearly every winter, every like Christmas time, and saw the movies as they came out. And I remember just walking out of The Last Jedi and just being like, that was not good.
I'm not going to get into that with you because
Yeah, no,
I
let's
will
not.
literally be here for the next 3 hours talking about The Last Jedi. And I'm not, what people need to understand is when they tell me, like, I get Discord messages all the time and they're telling me about, like, characters and this and that. I don't care. I am a Star Wars fan, but I am someone who's more, I've seen all of the first 6 movies. I've seen dozens of times, and I was actually, again, another shout out to C Squared, but like I was talking to him about this yesterday. I watched those dozens of times specifically because I grew up in an era where media was so limited. There was no
Yeah.
streaming, there was no download. It was just you had whatever DVDs you had. But I typically only watch things once because there's just so much media. I want to consume as much of it as I can. So when people remember all these little details, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no
Yeah.
idea. Like I envy you for remembering these things, but cool.
Yeah,
Like
I'm in a pretty similar boat with that. I mean, like similar thing. I know 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, just like off, the back of my hand. I know pretty much everything about it because it was again the movies that I watched to and from Texas every single year, twice a year. I watched those movies like all the time, and I had all the action figures and things when I was a little kid, and I didn't know anything about anything. It was just here's a cool thing to wave around. But
yeah,
like I lived and breathed Star Wars from literally, when I was a kid, and I have not rewatched 7, 8, 9 a single time. So I
not
remember I
even.
didn't like him, and I have no clue why. I can point to things that I didn't like, in particular, like the kiss at the very end of The Rise of Skywalker, that I was like, this is stupid, you know. or like thinking that, like the Sith Ray that she saw, I was like, that's kind of dumb and weird. And the fact that Fortnite is a necessary part of the Star Wars lore, like I remember that, Palpatine returned, figure out why in the Fortnite collaboration, you know, like, so I remember those types of things. But notice it was all from The Rise of Skywalker. Those are the only things I really remember, because I was like, 14 when that movie came out, I think.
And you being younger.
So, and so that was where I was conscious enough to actually like remember all of these things, instead of being 11 when The Force Awakens comes out and just being like, yay, new Star Wars.
More Star Wars. And I felt the same way at when that came out. I was probably 30. Sadly, probably even younger than that. I'm not going to do the math right now. But I was the same way. I was like, oh, great, more Star Wars. They are a little bit safe, but cool, fine. At least it's more Star Wars. But I remember being on the internet as each of these new movies came out, and as the trailer came out, and as like the teasers came out. And I think The Force Awakens, there were so many product tie-ins. There were like bananas being sold with Star Wars stickers. Like, it was insane.
I feel like I remember that actually a little bit, like very vaguely. I feel like
so insane. It was a crazy time. But again, I could literally sit here for till midnight talking just about those sequels, which is something that maybe in the future I will do with you off camera for fun. But I'm like, cool. I am absolutely not doing a 5-hour video right now. That's not me. That's an Arnold thing. What I do want to say is that we've been doing Tales Off the Holotable for we're in August right now, so about 8 months now. And you had actually reached out to me about doing this like 2 weeks ago. And a lot of people do reach out to me, and I think there's a lot of people who maybe don't realize that maybe they don't want to be on camera, and or they like the idea of it, and they don't realize what it entails. The reason that I enjoy doing this is, and the original purpose of it, which is what we had kind of talked about, is to talk to different players and different experiences and different worlds and different ages, and just kind of like get that idea of what's going on in their lives. I don't know where I was originally going with this, but I'll tell you where I'm going with this now. It has been great talking with you as someone who's not normally on camera, at least as far as I imagine it.
I think this is the first time I've ever been on camera on the internet ever.
I would consider maybe doing it more often, seriously, and just natural at being able to communicate with people. Two, as someone that I have communicated over the years with, not even realizing until this year that you were a generation behind me and younger. Like, it's cool to talk to someone and meet somebody that I've interacted with, and kind of see them in more of a state like this. But three, just I appreciate your time, and anyone who does make it to the end, because traditionally with videos, especially long form videos, very few people make it to the very end. And if I say it's worth doing, I'm kind of preaching to the choir of people who already did it. There's a lot of good information from someone who's a lot smarter than me when it comes to the things that are currently in the game, which is really like people like you who are looking at the raid and dealing with like the actual teams and figuring out all of that stuff. All I do is look at .gg and say, hey, this is what I would do, not necessarily this is the best path. So I do, appreciate your time in doing that. And as someone who is not a content creator in the same sense that maybe others would think, you do a great job of getting information out to the community, whether it's through your own name or whether it's through the server's name or whether it's through other people. You have your hand in quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Content creation is something I've kind of offhandedly considered, because of course I did kind of grow up in the YouTube generation where be a YouTuber was like the number one thing everyone wanted to do. And you kind of said it at the beginning, and it's something that I was like, oh fuck, that's kind of me. Of like, I always thought I was introverted, but I could kind of, swing it as extroverted, but I do think I'm extroverted and just kind of shy. I think that's
Yeah.
a thing too, you know. But the one thing I do think about is like, yeah, it's, I'm good at holding a conversation, but I don't know how I would do necessarily by myself. But, once I go to myself, I feel like I would just sit and lapse into silence and be like, okay, what do I say next?
That is
You know.
that's a whole nother skill. We were actually talking about this off camera. So for people who are confused, and I was saying to you that I've always felt I was very introverted and maybe I could present as extroverted. And I'm realizing that it's the opposite now. I was explaining to a few people actually today that being an on camera personality or doing Twitch or doing something else, even if your personality is 99% your real personality, and I do like to think that mine is, and that I'm largely the same person on camera as off camera, you have to be on, right? So it is a
Yeah.
special skill to have to be on constantly. But I really do think while it's a skill that you have to learn and it's a skill that you have to like be bad at for a little while, and I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think I've figured it out yet, but I'm learning the skill. That if it's something that you're adjacent to or thinking about, that it's something that you would take to a lot quicker than most people.
All right. Well, I mean, that's cool to hear. I do appreciate that. That's I'll think about it, honestly. I mean,
Yeah,
who
listen,
knows?
I'm gonna leave it at this. But what I will say to you now, and over the next couple of days, if it's something we can have more chats about this itself. But again, I appreciate your time. Anyone who has listened all the way through, go back to that first half or quarter, or 3 quarters, listen to it again. There's a lot of great information there. I don't know, just what do I normally sign out as peace out, but I'm gonna give you the last word.
All right. I mean, yeah, it's been a pleasure being here. I appreciate the opportunity. I had a lot of fun at this nearly almost 2 hour period, which is crazy. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure anybody who's still listening already kind of knows who I am, so I don't need to do any like, oh, I'll be over here or there. I'll be in the same places that you already talked to me. But yeah, I mean, it's been a pleasure, and who knows, you guys might see me again.
I
I
I
might fly in
seriously.
solo next time.